Alright, so this is the finished result that we're going to be making. So it's a basic fishing hut sitting next to a lake there. And as you can see with this animation, the camera doesn't move very much. So it just moves slightly forward and slightly to the west. That's really all the movement that you need to give the illusion of a video footage. This scene's got very basic geometry, so it's just got a basic hut there, a couple of other objects as well, but it's fairly easy to produce. Now, to get your image, I'd suggest finding an image off Flickr that looks good. There's plenty of good photographers out there making good stuff and putting it on here. Making sure, of course, the image you choose does have a Creative Commons license, so you can edit it and things. I'll give a link to this photo underneath the video if you want to play along at home. Now, when you get the image, what you need to do is to work out which objects are going to need geometry. So as you can see here, I've just done a basic outline to show you what I mean. So I know this hut is going to be a basic cube with a bit of a pointy triangle at the top. The pallets here are just going to have a basic cube. This drum looking thing, I'm going to make it a cylinder. This anchor, I'm just going to make a flat plane because it doesn't need to move very much. And then on top of that, we've got the floor here, which is just this ice sheet. And that I'm just going to make one single flat plane. And behind that you've got the ocean, which is a little bit lower than the ice. And then in the background there you've got the mountains and the sky, which can be just one flat plane or a UV sphere if you want. It's up to you. Okay, so once you've worked that out, you can jump into Blender. So with the default scene selected, go ahead and delete the cube and the lamp. Now go to side view and press Ctrl Alt number pad 0, and that will make the camera snap to the side view. Now we need to add the background image. Now in 2.5 that is located in this side toolbar here. So to turn that on, press the N key, and then under background images, select add image, then find the image that you saved off the internet. One other little tip, you can actually set the axis now in 2.5. So I'm going to set that to camera, which means now in front and side view, the image doesn't display anymore, only when you go to camera. So that's a little quick tip there that's very handy to know. Now the next thing you need to do is change the dimensions of the file. So I'm going to make this the dimensions of the image, which is 1200 by 800. That I know for a fact that that's what the dimensions are for that image. Now the reason for that is, as you can see when I'm changing that, like if I make this 2000, as you can see this image in the background that we're looking at distorts as well. So it needs to be the exact image dimension so that the perspectives of your scene are worked out correctly. Now next thing you need to do is select your camera and just move it up slightly. And as you can see, you've got the grid floor in the background there. Now we need to match up this grid floor with our with the scene, sorry, with the photo basically. So just judging it by eye, you can see that perspective wise, it's still probably a little bit too high. So that's probably a bit too much. So you want to just estimate, just so that this grid floor looks about like it would match up in real life. So that's looking okay to me. And now next thing we're going to do is add a cube. Now this cube is going to act as the basic point at which the object starts. So I'm going to move that up slightly so it's just resting along this x-axis there, along the grid floor. Okay, that's probably, I don't know what's going on there. Okay, alright. Now we just need to move this cube just so that it's in line with this shed. Now I'm not moving it along the Z axis, only along the X and Y. So now that we've got that flat line there just in line with the shed, we know that it's now in about the right place to begin starting our scene. So we can now go ahead and add a plane and just scale it upwards like so. Now that is going to act as this ice sheet here, this ground that our house here is going to be sitting on. Okay, now with this cube selected, we need to rotate it so that it matches this ice hut thing here, okay? So I'm just turning on the rotating handles there. I'm just going to rotate it slightly to about there. And then I'm going to turn on face mode and then select local here. And that will enable me to just move it along the local object dimensions like so. I think that's the wrong one, that handle. Green handle. Okay, so that matches up with that. That one's looking alright. And that is there as well. So that is that's the basic, basically where our shed is fitting in correlation with the scene. Now, depending on what photo, the photo that was taken, you may need to change the lens of your camera. So by default in Blender, it's 35. Now, I know for a fact that with this photo, it was actually taken with a 38, just from trial and error that I worked out. So with 38, you can see it matches up a little bit better than with 35. So if you're experimenting with your scene, you can't work out why nothing is fitting, it could just be that the lens is not, the Blender lens is not matching up with the correct one the photographer used. So now I'm just forming the basic roof here. Won't spend too much time on this. Now we actually want it to go past or go beyond what the of where it ends on the image, really. Now the reason for that is we're actually going to be isolating this shed from the rest of the image using an image editing program, which I'll show you in just a second. So it'll use an alpha channel, so it doesn't really matter if it goes past where the image ends. If that makes sense. I don't think that makes sense to me even. Okay, so that's looking okay. You could go into a bit more detail and make sure that lines up, but that is the basic premise for working out where it is. It is actually the most time-consuming process, just adding the first object and getting it to line up right. I know I had a very long, stressful night when I was doing the smoke simulation animation, just trying to get it to all work out right. So yeah, it can take a little bit of time, but once you've got it, it all seems to fall into place from there. Okay, so as I explained, we need to now move to our image editor. Now I'm going to use Photoshop. You can use GIMP if you want to. I'm not going to because I can't stand the interface myself. Besides, I paid for Photoshop, I might as well use it. So I'm going to be using Photoshop here. I've just got the pen tool now, and I'm just drawing the outline of the shed. It's very rough. Doesn't need to be perfect. Just make sure it lines up there. Control C, Control V. It's added that to a separate layer now. And now we've isolated that shed very easily. So now I'm just going to start a new folder. Files 2, and I'm just going to save this as shed. Now we need to make sure that the image format is PNG, because that will give us the alpha channel. So go ahead and save that. Now moving on to the fun part. So we want basically to do that thing that I discussed at the beginning where the Blender fires the image out of it onto the cube. So to do that, what we need to do, first of all, we'll set up the material for the object. So add a new material, turn on shadeless, because we don't actually need any lighting to our scene, because the image is already lit basically. Now turn on transparency and set it to 0 because we only want it to use the alpha channel in our image. So go to the texture panel, set it up for image, and find the image that we just created in our image editor. And now we need to enable pre-multiply so that we don't get that fuzzy, ugly edge around the outside. Now set the mapping to sticky, and I'll show you what that will do in a second. And we also need to enable alpha in the implement. So color and alpha, as long as those are checked, it should work. And I'll just save this in case it crashes, as it tends to do. Now, if we render this now, we get nothing. Now, the reason for that is that Blender doesn't know what the sticky coordinates are yet. Now, to do that, just need to hit spacebar, type type in sticky, and you've got add or remove sticky. I'm just going to hit add sticky. Now, actually, if you like, you could probably just add it to the tool shelf because you might need it a lot. And also, go ahead and add remove sticky as well, because those are you use them a lot when you're doing this process. But now that we've done that, we've added the sticky. If we hit render now, as you can see, our shed is now showing up. And if we moved the camera, then it would move according to, it would be already camera mapped. The shed is now ready to go. Now the next object is the floor. Now it's a little bit different this, and I'll show you why. So if we go back to our image editor, and I will trace around this very quickly, because I know how tedious it can be if you're watching a video tutorial. Someone is just going along with the path tool. Pretty sure I'd go insane if this was my job to do this every day. But, alas, it needs to be done. So I'm just very roughly, these rocks are a bit difficult. Just painting around. Basic outline. Now if something's in front of it, like this anchor is here, just go through it like so. Doesn't matter that much. So I'll show you what we're going to be doing next. Like so. Just make sure these are included there. Get all those pixels. Control click. And then Control C, Control V. Okay, so now I've isolated the ground here. Now I'll just show you this this animation again. So as you can see, as the camera moves forward, you can see that behind the shed and the ocean here and things like that, we've got parts of the image that weren't there before. Now this effect is done with the clone tool in your image editor. So it does involve a little bit of know-how as to how to do that, but I'll just show you very briefly how I'm going to do that for the ground object. Okay, so selecting the clone tool, sure this is very similar to GIMP if you're using that. I'm going to set the hardness to about 70. And I'm just going to erase parts of it that are either going to have geometry there, such as that anchor, or that is going to be exposed. So this part's here, where the shed was, it's going to be exposed. So I'm just going to copy part of this little muddy texture over here as to where the shed was sitting, so that when the camera rolls past it, it looks very believable because it's got this sort of little foundation look underneath it. Now, one thing to note, unlike if you were doing a Photoshop manipulation, it doesn't really matter if it doesn't look perfect, because it's a moving image. Like if you had a look at the New York animation again, you'll notice so many different cloning errors. It's not funny, but you don't notice it because there's so much other stuff going on. So it doesn't need to be perfect is what I'm getting at. Now we'll just save that as well. And saved. There we go. So jump back into Blender. If we add, I'm just going to do the same thing we did very quickly with what we did for the ice hut. Now there is a problem that we're going to run into that is only specific to the floor. So that's why I'm showing you all this. Enable pre-multiply, alpha, mapping, sticky. Alright, enable tool, add sticky, as we did. Now if we render it, ta-da, the floor appears. Now I will show you something. Now that looks fine from that viewport. Something that we're going to run into later down the road is if we move this camera forward and we render this, something's happened. The ground has distorted and warped in a strange way. The shed looks fine, it looks great, but the ground looks horrible. Now it took me ages to work this out the first time it happened, but basically the reason for that is that with this plane, it's one face.